This is your World War III update. Okay, let me get this straight. So in the first week of 2026, we have seen the following. Are you ready for this? In the first week of 2026, we have seen Navy SEALs board and seize a Russian vessel. Yes, Navy SEALs, not the U.S. Coast Guard, the specialists of special ops, seize a Russian oil tanker in international waters with Russian nuclear submarines and warships intel. Okay? We also had the Russians put to sea the largest nuclear submarine that is armed with 6 nuclear propulsion nuclear drones that are maneuverable coastline killers with a potential payload of 100 megatons. Okay, first week of 2026, we have Donald Trump proposing a $1.5 trillion military budget for 2027. That is 50% more than the record. $1.5 trillion to build a dream World War III military. Are you still with me? We have a Russian oil tanker that was hit today. We have the 4th largest city in Ukraine completely blacked out. We have the Iranian protests reaching a fever pitch as internet in the country has been completely shut down. No internet. We had the Maduro thing at the beginning of the year where they captured a president in the middle of the night and initiated a war on the country with the world's largest oil reserves. First week of 2026, we have a deal being signed to put NATO troops in Ukraine, okay? We have Israeli diplomats being flown out of Israel, Russian diplomats inside Israel being flown out at a rapid pace in anticipation of a major war with Iran. We have the beginnings of quite possibly a civil war in Minnesota, okay? First week. I'm not sure if you guys have been watching the CES, the Consumer Tech Conference, but some of the robotics technology that has been released this week is something out of a science fiction film. The Atlas robot is downright terrifying when you know full well that what they're working towards is soldiers. That's what this is all about. And that's just what we see. The precious metals up 5-10% on the year already. Well, down a little bit today, but who cares? Trump signs a bill imposing or approves a bill for 500% tariffs on anybody who buys Russian oil. The first 7 days of 2026. How are you feeling about this year, guys? I need to know how people are doing out there because I tell you, this is not looking good. This is not looking good. I'm going to share my thoughts today on the events that unfolded in Minnesota yesterday because I believe it's important. And I'm not going to give you some wishy-washy gray man on the fence point of view. I think this was stone cold murder, if I'm being honest. But I will say this. You can be pro-ICE. You can be in approval of the ICE mandate to get criminals off the streets who are illegal immigrants. You can be pro-ICE in that capacity. I think there's a debate to be had as to whether or not people who are upstanding, productive, tax-paying members who boost the American GDP and quality of life, if they're here illegally, should there be a pathway to citizenship? Okay, you can have that debate, but you can be pro-ICE. I need people to understand because there's nuance to this conversation. You can be pro-ICE, but you can also call a spade a spade. You can understand that even ICE can demonstrate excessive use of force. And you have to really ask yourself, because there's some people who think that these guys can never demonstrate enough use of force. And to that, I would say be very careful, because this is a federal agency that historically the right wing has been at odds with, okay? And they never relinquish control. And there's only 3 years left, potentially only 1 year left for the Congress in the House, or the Senate in the House. And so be very careful with what you wish for, because it will be weaponized against you in the future. Now, I predicted all of this. I said that this was going to happen right when ICE got that big budget. I said, okay, so what you're telling me is, I can't remember the exact videos, but it was a series of videos back in late 2024 probably. And I said that what you're going to have happen is one of these ICE agents is going to shoot somebody, and it's going to lead to riots, and both sides are going to dig their heels in, and it's going to escalate from there. I said that. In fact, I'm surprised it hasn't happened already and it took this long to happen. So I'm going to tell you my problems with what happened here and the way people are responding to it. You have a lot of agitators on all sides who are trying to weaponize this politically. Again, you can be pro-ICE, okay? And probably against the advice of my editors, a lot of my biggest fans. You should never fan out on people. Fanaticism is never a good thing. They would say, don't make this video, Nate. But as you guys can probably appreciate, at this point, I don't give a fuck, okay? Because we're in the end. This is not even Christian eschatology. We're in the end times. This is the quickening. In the last 7 days, that's what's happened, okay? Now, why I think this was an excessive use of force is probably what people want to know. The problem with this is, if you're on the right and you support what ICE is doing, is normalizing excessive use of force, and any form of authoritarianism is not a good thing when the guns are turned against you. And that's what the setup is here. And most people can't see far in advance. I seen all of this coming years ago, before I even had a YouTube channel. The robots, the right-left polarization, the whole 9 yards. I knew it was coming, and I can tell you, in 3 years, when the real civil war starts, when the Democrats assert control of pretty much everything as a consequence of people overplaying their hands, watch what happens. Because the only way you have a civil war, like in a sense that most people understand it, where it's actually competitive and it's not just going to be one side completely dominating the other, which is what it would be if it started right now, right? I mean, if the right, who has control of the government, and you have all the good old boys who, you know, on an average Sunday fire off 500 rounds, okay, against people with who are more concerned with dressing up in costumes and putting a bunch of metal shards in their face and how many colors they can put in their hair, that's going to be over pretty quickly. The Civil War starts when the Democrats take control of all of the agencies that you've now conferred all of these powers upon. And when they start to weaponize that against you. But you see, people don't think about this stuff. This is how, this is how great investors get rich, is because they can see the future that's coming. And one thing I can't stand is the bootlicking that's going on. Again, you can be pro-ICE and you can call out this bad behavior, because I can tell you that this error of judgment on the part of this officer will reflect badly on the organization long term. Now, they are digging their heels in with this assessment of the situation that says that the government, the officer feared for his life because they know that eventually this is going to go to trial. This will. And this is why they're sticking to that line. And I'm not sure why, because they could easily, not endorse this and still continue with their operations. But what is ultimately going to happen, I think, is this will be investigated. Maybe, even if the guy is prosecuted, he'll be given a presidential pardon or something like that, right? And then this thing spirals out of control further. But the problem is that what they've now done is they've put all other ICE members at risk. In the same way that Israel committing a genocide in the Gaza Strip puts Jews everywhere around the world at risk, because the wrongdoing, you're representing, even though you're not necessarily representing the views of all Jewish people around the world, Unfortunately, there's going to be people who say that that reflects badly on everybody who endorses the Zionist policies. And in the same way, one rogue ICE agent who acts out of line is potentially now going to be putting the lives of all other ICE agents at risk. How? Well, because now, because of the asymmetry in terms of force capability, when you look at, these people who are sniping people, the stochastic terrorism, which is essentially just random acts of generally provoked terrorism, which is asymmetrical in nature because the left does not have the manpower, the experience, the material, the military mindset to engage in a civil war directly with the right. So it turns into incidents of sniping. And I have a sneaking suspicion that's what you're going to see. You are going to see more large-scale attacks on ICE agents, but these ones are probably going to be lethal. Now, I hope that doesn't happen, because all that's going to cause is the other side to dig their heels in and escalate, and then the other side's going to do the same, and everybody's going to be increasingly more paranoid, and, shit's going to hit the fan. The only thing that can bring down the United States at this point is a civil war. And it looks like that's potentially going to happen. So, unfortunately, this lapse in judgment of a guy who was apparently holding his phone in one hand, you can see it on the video. I'm pretty sure, unless this was fake, regardless, it doesn't matter. A lot of people are saying the guy was standing in front of the vehicle when he fired the first shot. He was standing in an oblique angle. He was off to the side before he pulled the trigger. All right? And no, the woman was not trying to kill the officer. I mean, in Canada, you have to prove that you are at risk of grievous bodily harm before you unload on somebody. I'm not sure what it is in the United States. I'm sure the laws are far more liberal, not in the liberal sense, but in the sense that, the bar for entry into that act is much lower. But, I mean, not to get into the technical specifics, because there's just a lot of gaslighting going on. When you look at the video footage, I mean, anybody who's not like a professional agitator, anybody who's not just trying to have their X account amplified by an Elon Musk retweet, clearly can see that this woman, even though she shouldn't have been there, you could make that argument that these people were boxing in the ICE agents. The objective was to get her out of there so that they could, I think they had their vehicle stuck, so that they could move forward. And so if she fled the scene, get her license plate, go and arrest her later on, don't unload into a vehicle of somebody who is clearly fleeing. She backs up, she turns the wheel. Now, people will show footage of other incidents where police officers were in a similar situation and the car turned in and was weaponized against them with the intent of actually murdering or doing serious injury to the police officer. But this clearly was not that. I would say this is second-degree murder. It wasn't like premeditated. It wasn't manslaughter, right? Because the cop did, want to, I shouldn't call him a cop, he's an ICE agent, and I'm not sure how their training differs from law enforcement or what his background was. He certainly wasn't injured. He didn't have to go to the hospital. If he did, it was just protocol. The doctor probably looked at him and said, "You're fine, go home." Right? So this idea that he was run over, and this is why Trump just lost the midterms. Trump just lost the midterms because the tweet that he put out with no investigation, not even saying, okay, we're going to investigate what's going on here. Not even that. Just say we're going to investigate. You could say what it looks like to you, but to say we're not even going to conduct an investigation and that the guy was run over and seriously injured is just a bunch of baloney. And everybody knows that. So I think the FBI even declined to investigate, which is insane, right? So this will be eventually brought to trial, I do believe. And look, I'm not trying to pontificate and give you some sort of moral education here. This is not a didactic video. I'm well beyond, knowing. I'm just sharing my point of view because, people want to know what I think about the situation. Again, I think you can support what ICE is doing, taking the criminals off the street who aren't supposed to be there. But you can also, and you also have to appreciate that at some point there is something called excessive use of force, because if you don't, then that's opening up a really bad can of worms that will ultimately be weaponized against you. Those guns will be turned on you at some point. So I suspect that that's what's going to happen. Now I want to show you guys. I mean, this is just, if you want, like this is my technical analysis right here. Okay, so the cop is off to the side of the video and he shoots. People are referencing the bullet hole through the front windshield. Well, I mean, that could have happened like that, right? And it did happen like that. We can see it. Now, the guy was brushed with a vehicle. Does that warrant unloading a clip? Well, maybe not unloading a clip, but murdering somebody? I don't think so. No, I don't think so. And if you think that's good to be normalized, well, eventually one of you will be abiding by the law. Maybe you get pulled over by a police officer, and because that level of activity has been normalized, you can be a right-wing Christian person coming from a TPUSA event or whatever, and they will do that to you because, I don't know, you disagreed, or, they felt that you weren't complying. And so, look, this is what a police officer used to look like, okay? And you see what they look like now. In Canada, they're taking all the guns away. Our cops don't look like this anymore. They look like they're going to war with the population. You got to ask yourself, is that really a good thing? I don't think it is. I think people should question whether or not that's a good thing. Now, apparently, the training that these guys get is something like this. And this is, I don't want to say the smoking gun, that this guy was in error, but it certainly adds to the evidence that would suggest that. Okay, according to a senior Homeland Security official who told NBC News, this is how ICE officers are trained to respond in this situation, okay? Never approach a vehicle from the front. Why would any fool stand in front of a vehicle? Like, what sort of invincibility complex do you have that you think you can stand in front of a vehicle as it's being commandeered by a suspect? How stupid do you have to be? Stand off to the side of the vehicle. Like, that's just common sense. And maybe don't be holding a phone in one hand, videotaping the interaction. That's what body cams are for, but I don't think these guys have body cams. I mean, let's face it, they're walking around in casual clothing with body armor, with masks on. I don't even know to what extent they have to identify themselves. What a circus. I mean, we really need to ask ourselves as a society, what does it come to that we're in this particular predicament? And as many of you guys know, I think this is all training for martial law. I think that when World War III happens, they need a bunch of bootlicking brown shirts that can go around and corral the population, lock the population down, and that's what this all is. This is all just training, and it's conscription training as well. Because if you look very closely, what you're seeing in Ukraine, when the commissars come and scoop people up, it looks a lot like what happens with ICE, and that's what they're getting us normalized to. Anyways, never approach the vehicle from the front. No fucking shit. To approach vehicles or possibly arm people in a tactical L 90-degree angle to prevent injury or crossfire. Not to shoot at a moving vehicle. Obviously, because there could be innocent bystanders around. Now, I don't know if there's, in certain cases, because people use their car for ramming attacks, and this might be the argument that they make, is that, well, we thought that she was going to go on some, ramming spree or something like that because it happened before, it was precedented. But clearly, I don't think they're going to be able to get it. It depends on how good the lawyer is of this family, right? Not to shoot at a moving vehicle, only to use force if there's an immediate risk of serious injury or death. I guarantee you this guy didn't even get a scratch from what was shown. Not even a scratch from what was shown on camera. Maybe pulled a muscle or something. ICE officers are also instructed that firing at a vehicle will not make it stop moving in the direction of the officer. No shit. So, that's what it is, man. But they want you to pound this square peg into this round hole. Look, this is a social psychology experiment that was done by Solomon Asch. I think it was in the 1960s, okay, when they were doing all these conformity experiments. Because they were trying to figure out, how did the Nazis do what they did, right? So, this is the Solomon Asch experiment. And there was a participant who didn't realize that the people around him were actors, okay? And their job was to pressure him into believing that this line here was equal in size to this one here. In 75% of participants were able to finally agree that this was the same length as this, just due to overwhelming pressure and conformity. Okay? So I would not expect much out of social media, especially there's certain dissent amongst the ranks in the right. There's some people who are saying, yeah, this was not good. But for the most part, they're all just jockeying for an Elon Musk retweet. And I don't understand, because there can be nuance in these conversations, man. It's fine. It doesn't do ICE agents any good to justify what happened, because eventually this is going to put them in harm's way. And in the second week of 2026, we are likely going to see bullets flying in the other direction. Now, it's kind of cold out, but there is actually record-breaking temperatures throughout the next week, which will likely see even more people head out into the streets to protest. And so will this be weaponized by our adversaries? We have to be very, very careful, because we're picking fights all around the world. All of the consequences of what's going on in Iran, with Russia, with Venezuela, with China and Taiwan, all of these things require unity within the country who is, leading the charge. So if there is this level of division and polarization, America's screwed. And if you start seeing the stock market tanking, and if you start seeing precious metals skyrocketing, I would suspect that many people are worried and they're getting their money out of the system, right? Because America, for all its faults, is still the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry basket as far as global stock exchanges go and monetary systems. And as such, people put their money there. But if it starts to look like there could potentially be real civil unrest and an actual civil war, then people are going to start pulling their money out. And that's when the whole Ponzi scheme could potentially collapse. Because a big part of what's propping up the U.S. economy is foreign investment. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's very high in terms of how much foreigners' money is parked in the U.S. stock market right now. All right? And bonds and dollars. But if people start losing faith, then they're going to pull that money out. And people are going to put that money into gold and silver, as they are doing. And Bitcoin, for sure. Unfortunately, because, I'm not a big bit bro. And looking at how the Iranians just throttled their internet, they can do that here. And this is what people need to realize. They're going to do it here, and they're going to do it intermittently in the run-up to SHTF. And because AI is so good, and that's just what we see, that's not the full power of these companies that are fully in bed with the government. So the AI that we see and the deepfakes that we see pale in comparison to what they actually could make if they cranked it all the way up. in terms of the compute power. So just imagine the stuff that they're going to be putting out, the Orwellian-like stuff, when the shooting actually starts. They're going to shut off the internet and they're going to turn it back on periodically to give you your programming. That's what's happening. It's going to happen like it happens in Iran right now. NetBlocks is reporting widespread outages. In some places, a total outage. Now, of course, the Mossad agents are probably using Starlink, right, in order to continue to foment chaos. Donald Trump also announced Wednesday that the United States would be withdrawing from 66 treaties. Interesting number. And international organizations which he claimed no longer serve American interests. I'm not going to go over this list, but it's basically global everything. And some people will cheer that. Sure, that's fine. But just remember, the global reserve currency is such for a reason. Right? The international rules-based order, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Maybe you can for a while people are scared and looking for a place to park their cash, but not for long. I got to go talk to David Morgan about silver today. What he suspects is going to happen with the silver markets. Well, the cyberpunk future, I suspect that silver is going to be in great demand. So I'm bullish, and unless it's some other hard asset, I don't really see any other lucrative investments unless you're talking military industrial complex, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. That's and maybe some robotics companies, but then you're just co-signing your own prison that is going to be used to enslave us all someday. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I'm going to be brutally honest. I'm not going to lie and be like, yeah, I'm going to go and read the comments on this video. I'm not getting sucked into that vortex today. I got things to do. But please, if you maybe argue with each other if you so feel the need. But at this point in time, I think the best use of your time is just to be stoic, focus on the preparedness aspect of this. You ain't going to change anybody's mind. You ain't, unfortunately. This one really is going to bring out the worst in people. I hope that I've provided a little bit of nuance to the conversation. And remember, you can support your cause, but supporting your cause and excessive use of force, these aren't mutually exclusive. You can have both, okay? So, we'll see you tomorrow.